Hello viewers, it's Josie. Welcome back to Eclectic Movie Reviews and Updates. Happy holidays! Back in late August, I talked about my favorite first-time watches of the spring and summer of 2020. Today, December 19th, I'm going to discuss my favorite first-time watches of the fall and winter of 2020. First up, Absolute Power from 1997, directed by Clint Eastwood. This is a political thriller based on a novel of the same name by David Baldacci. Clint Eastwood plays a thief. When he's in the middle of stealing jewelry, he witnesses a murder crime involving the President of the United States, played by Gene Hackman. A little Unforgiven reunion there. Mystery ensues with Ed Harris as a detective and Clint Eastwood's daughter, played by Clint Eastwood's character's daughter, played by Laura Linney, who just so happens to be a prosecutor. Now, I don't want to give too much away because you can't really talk about the plot without spoiling it. All I can say is, political beliefs aside, it's very relevant to today. It's available on Hulu, and I'm sure you can get a DVD of it somewhere. Next up is one of the Jimmy Stewart westerns called Bend of the River from 1952, directed by Anthony Mann. Jimmy Stewart plays an outlaw leading farmers to Oregon, and on the way, Stewart meets a thief played by Arthur Kennedy, so he tags along with the group. However, things get tricky when their resources and supplies are being taken from them. And then tension arises between James Stewart and Arthur Kennedy's characters when Kennedy's character tries to steal the items. If you're looking for just a fun Western adventure, this is a gem for you. It's available on Blu-ray through Kino Lorber. The color looks amazing. It's also streaming on Peacock, which I currently do not have. I have the Blu-ray. Oh wait, I returned it. I returned it the other day, so I don't have it with me. But if I did, I would show you the cover. Next is Chopping Mall from 1986. This is a hilarious, action-packed horror adventure in a mall. Basically, a mall has these security robots called killbots, and as the title suggests, they end up killing people. And when they do so, they say, "Have a nice day." And as ridiculous as it is, it actually works as a satire on consumerism and rising technology. Kind of like other movies in that time period, like Repo Man and RoboCop, which I have yet to see, but I hear is in that vein. Chopping Mall is available to watch on Shudder and YouTube, and there's also a Blu-ray through Vestron Video. Anyway, next is an adorable Scottish romantic teen comedy from 1981 called Gregory's Girl, directed by Bill Forsyth, director of Local Hero. Now, this Gregory's Girl centers on a high school soccer player named Gregory, who develops a crush on a new female teammate, Dorothy. When his younger sister tries to help him out, he ends up falling for another girl, Susan. It's a really sweet movie. It's available to watch on the Criterion channel. I want to thank Brian Sauer from the Pure Cinema and Just a Disc podcasts for turning me on to this movie. And you can also rent it for a couple dollars on Amazon. There's a Blu-ray through Film Movement, but I believe as of now that there's only one copy. I would love to see Criterion, Arrow, or Kino put out a Blu-ray copy of their own. That would be really cool. Even like right now on the Criterion channel, they have 3 by Bill Forsyth. Local Hero, Gregory's Girl, and the think it's called Housekeeper or Housekeeping. I forget the title, but it would be cool if Criterion Eclipse series put out a Blu-ray collection of those 3 films. Next up, The Holy Mountain from 1973, directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky. Watching this movie is a transcendental experience. It is literally and metaphorically a trip. When I watched this movie with my brother in his apartment one day, it was like I was transported into a vortex of imagination. My brother called it a spiritual Willy Wonka. I think it would make a good pairing with Being There, because both films involve spiritual journeys and self-discovery. A while back, I posted in the Pure Cinema Podcast fan group on Facebook, listing some of my favorite first-time watches. I included Being There and The Holy Mountain, to which someone replied, "If you watched The Holy Mountain and Being There for the first time this year, your 2020 is the envy of every film fanatic in this club." You can rent The Holy Mountain on Amazon for a couple of dollars, and it's also included in the Jodorowsky 4K Restoration Collection. Next up, Invention for Destruction from 1958, directed by Karel Zeman. This is a Czech New Wave film adapted from a Jules Verne story called Facing the Flag. What happens is a scientist invents a highly destructive explosive machine, and the scientist's assistant tries to stop the pirates from their scheme. When they try to, the pirates try to intervene. It's a lot of fun. It's partially animated. The practical effects and animation are pretty incredible for the time period, even for a black and white film. It sort of plays like a pop-up book. I would not be surprised if this was an influence on Wes Anderson when making The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. In fact, I think Invention for Destruction would make an interesting pairing with it. This would also make a good double bill with James and the Giant Peach, because they are both partially animated adventures based on classic literature. It's available to stream on the Criterion channel through in the Saturday matinee section, and it's also included in the 3 Fantastic Journeys from Karel Zeman collection from Criterion on Blu-ray. That contains Invention for Destruction, Journey to the Beginning of Time, and The Fabulous Baron Munchausen. Those 2 movies I still have to see. Anyway, next up, The King and the Mockingbird from director Paul Grimault. This is a French animated film based on the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale called The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep, and that was the original movie title. It was released in incomplete form in 1952. However, over the course of the 60s and 70s, director Paul Grimault obtained the rights and completed production as he intended, and it was finally released as a completed movie in 1980. The animation is beautiful, which is narratively such an advantage to the film because so much of the story relies on visuals more than dialogue. The version I watched was the 1952 version on the Criterion Channel's Saturday matinee section. I would love to see the 1980 completed version. Unfortunately, the Blu-ray is out of print. I would love to see Criterion era where Kino put it out. Nonetheless, the 1952 version is still fantastic. I encourage those watching to check it out. Next up, Kirikou and the Sorceress from 1998, directed by Michel Ocelot. I could be pronouncing his name wrong. Forgive me for that. Another French animated movie inspired by West African folktales. This narrative follows a baby who is quite mature for his age, with the ability to speak and walk at birth as he confronts the much-feared sorceress, Karaba. It's an inspirationally touching story and takes a turn you would not expect, in a good way though. It's streaming on the Criterion channel in the Saturday matinee section. It's also available to watch on Canopy, and there is a Blu-ray. Next on my list is Meet the Feebles 1989. First things first, I want to thank Elric Kane from the Pure Cinema podcast for turning me onto this. This is a puppet movie directed by Peter Jackson, of all people. Basically, what Avenue Q was to Sesame Street, Meet the Feebles is to the Muppets. The plot follows these animals, who work at a sleazy theater. There's a hippo meant to be like Miss Piggy, except nastier and more violent. And the movie, towards the end, gets very violent. Without spoiling anything, it's pretty bonkers. The director is a rat, and the boss is, most fittingly, a big walrus. There's also a cute little love story between a hedgehog and a poodle. Who would have thought that the director of the Lord of the Rings franchise would make a movie like this? Unfortunately, it's not very accessible. You can watch a crappy quality version of it on YouTube. That's how I did. But I didn't care. All that mattered is if I watched the movie somehow. There is a DVD you can order off Amazon, but it's almost out of stock. Like, I think there are literally only three copies left. I would love to see a label like Arrow, Shout Factory, or Vinegar Syndrome put this out to put to those working at those labels. If you're listening, consider curating Meet the Feebles. Finally, after watching this movie, I thought that if anyone were to direct a movie version of Avenue Q, it should be Peter Jackson. He could have. I heard they're rebooting Fraggle Rock. Maybe they should ask him to direct an episode. Next up is another movie with a monkey. The previous movie I mentioned that had a monkey in it was The Holy Mountain. Okay. Phenomena from 1985, directed by Dario Argento. This is what I would call a supernatural horror fantasy about a girl named Jennifer, played amazingly by Jennifer Connelly, with the ability to psychically communicate with bugs who, when attending an all-girl boarding school in Switzerland, uses her powers to track down a serial killer, murdering those at the school. What's interesting about Phenomena is that while it is certainly a similar horror vein as Argento's previous 1977 film Suspiria, it also has elements of a hero's journey narrative. I mean, Jennifer Connelly's character attending a school with a mysterious killer on the loose is undoubtedly her call to adventure. Additionally, the entomologist, played by the one and only Donald Pleasance, unquestionably serves as the mentor, and the monkey is most certainly an ally. Of course, the insects are allies too. It's available to stream on Shudder and Canopy, and there's also a Synapse Blu-ray. Next is The Rock from 1976, directed by Michael Bay. I know he's not the most critically acclaimed director because of the Transformers franchise, but this movie is awesome. It's about an FBI agent specializing in chemical warfare, played by Nicolas Cage, who is assigned with a British spy, played by Sean Connery, R.I.P., to prevent chemical weapons from being launched in Alcatraz. When looking at the film under a hero's journey lens, Cage and Connery have a classic yet unconventional hero-mentor dynamic. I recently rewatched Dragonheart, and Sean Connery does the voice of the dragon, who serves as the mentor figure. While Sean Connery's mentor style in Dragonheart is one of divine wisdom, his mentorship in The Rock is one of wisecracking one-liners. This makes sense since Quentin Tarantino has a screenwriting credit on this. The cast also includes Ed Harris, Michael Biehn, David Morse, William Forsythe, and John C. McGinley from Office Space fame. Like other Michael Bay flicks, it's got a lot of explosions, but they serve the story because the narrative centers around chemical warfare. The Rock is available on Hulu, Blu-ray, and you can also rent it for a couple of dollars on Amazon Prime. Next up, Stargate from 1994, directed by Roland Emmerich. He's another director who's not the most loved for his filmography, since most people associate him with Batman and Robin. However, he also directed some classics like this and The Lost Boys. In Stargate, a linguist played by James Spader and an army colonel played by Kurt Russell enter into an interstellar Stargate portal that transports them into a planet reminiscent of ancient Egypt. It's a blast. It can certainly be classified as a hero's journey story. Not just for James Spader, but for Kurt Russell as well. Unfortunately, it's not available to watch on any streaming platform, not even Amazon Prime. Luckily, you can get it on Blu-ray, which is how I watched it. Got an interloan. This is why physical media should not go away. Anyway, another movie with the word star in the title, Starman from 1984, directed by John Carpenter, starring Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen. A star being inhabits the dead body of Scott Hayden, played by Jeff Bridges, as he ends up falling for the man's widow, Jenny, played by Karen Allen. Together, they go on an adventure to Arizona so Jeff Bridges can jump back onto the vessel and travel back to his home planet. It's obviously quite different than John Carpenter's Halloween, The Fog, The Thing, and Christine, since he's mainly known for horror. However, I can't see anyone else directing this better than the way John Carpenter did. Interestingly, the beginning sequence is sort of similar to Halloween and Christine, in that there happens to be a POV tracking shot similar to the one in Halloween, and we see a car that looks like the one from Christine. Rhyme not intended. John Carpenter is known for doing the music to his own films, but the score for Starman was done by Jack Nitzsche. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. He scored One Floor of the Cuckoo's Nest, The Exorcist, and An Officer and a Gentleman. Although the music is not composed by John Carpenter, it is still incredible. It has an inspiring feel-good sound, if you know what I mean. It's available on Blu-ray through Scream Factory, so you can see if your library has a copy. If not, you can request an interloan like I did. It's also available to rent on Amazon Prime, but of course you have to pay. And next is The Tall T from 1957, directed by Bud Budaker. I want to thank Brian Sauer for introducing me to this movie. It's a Western based on a magazine novelette by Elmore Leonard. The protagonist is played by Randolph Scott. In the beginning, after losing a gambling bet, he loses his horse. Now being horseless, Randolph Scott pretty much hitchhikes with a couple played by John Hubbard and Maureen O'Sullivan. Unfortunately, they are tracked down and held hostage by a group of bandits, their leader being played by Richard Boone. In the midst of their detainment, Randolph Scott's character falls in love with Maureen O'Sullivan's character. It's just a fun little Western romance, only a crisp 78 minutes, a length that Elric Kane loves. Shout out to him. It's on Blu-ray through Indicator, but I think it's almost out of print, sadly. I rented it through an interlibrary loan DVD, not a Blu-ray. Not a Blu-ray, but it still looked really nice. Regardless, if you like Westerns, I highly encourage you to check this out. And finally, Willow from 1988, directed by Ron Howard. This is a fantasy adventure about a dwarf farmer, aspiring magician, named Willow, played by Warwick Davis, who is sent on a journey to safeguard a divine baby from an evil matriarch. Again, this is another hero's journey narrative for both Warwick Davis and Val Kilmer's characters. Similar to Stargate, it's a dual hero's journey. They sort of mentor each other throughout their adventure. As I said, directed by Ron Howard, screen story by George Lucas, and screenplay by Bob Dolman. It's available to watch on Disney+. You can also get it on Blu-ray. My mom and I actually watched it together on Disney Plus the day before Election Day. Talk about perfect escapism. In closing, I would like to give special shout outs to Brian Sauer and Elric Kane from the Pure Cinema podcast, as well as Aaron Penn. In such a challenging year, you three saved my 2020 by turning me on to such awesome movies. There were many days this year where I cried, but also there were days where I smiled listening to your podcasts and YouTube videos during meal times and during work. Without you guys, I would not be doing this video. And a lot of how I do my recent videos is modeled after how you guys do your podcasts. And that will do it for this video of my favorite first time watches of fall and winter 2020. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this video, then you could press the like button and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at Eclectic Movie Updates. And you could follow me on Letterboxd at my name on Letterboxd is Eclectic Movies. I have another YouTube series called Positive Poems. The Instagram page for that is at Positive Poems. Anyway, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. See you next time. Goodbye for now.